Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Robert Jackson, and today we're here, just sitting here on this nice, lovely Friday afternoon. We are now past the morning hours, so today we're going to be chatting with an incredibly talented and somebody who's been in showbiz for quite a long time. Ladies and gentlemen, I have sitting with me in the corner, Miss Alison Arngrim. Thank you for joining me for today's podcast
Thank you.
episode.
Thank you very much. Hi.
Yeah, not to worry. Yeah, I've always wanted to have like somebody who's been a part of who's done live shows like Broadway, theater, and whatnot. So this is a very special treat. So yeah, would you like to share most of what you do? What are some of your most well-known work? And yeah, for those that want to get more familiar with Miss Alison, take it away.
Well, how long do you have? Because let's see, my career has been going since 1967, and so I started working as a kid, obviously, and my first show, my whole family were in show business. My parents started a theater in Canada, so I started working when I was 5, 6 years old. But I didn't get Little House on the Prairie until I was 12. And then I was Nellie Olson on Little House on the Prairie for 7 years. And during the course of the show, I took up stand-up comedy when I was a teenager. And then after the show, I did all the usual things: Love Boat, Fantasy Island, TV Movies of the Week, dinner, theater, etc., and began touring the country with my stand-up act about then. And so I did that for many years, theater and stand-up. And then, of course, in the 1980s, when my co-star, Steve Tracy, who played my husband on the show, died of AIDS, I got very involved with AIDS Project Los Angeles, doing AIDS education and activism and helping people living with HIV. Then in around 2000, I started my 2002 one-woman show, Confessions of a Prairie Bitch, which I launched in New York. And I've done, well, technically all over the world, US, Canada. And then I have the French version, of course, I've been doing for the last like 20 years in France, all over in the small towns in France, Confessions d'une Garce. And I have another show in French too, Mal au Trésor. And I just got back from doing a show in Atlanta. And I'm heading out next week to the Marshfield, Missouri Cherry Blossom Festival with several other cast members of Little House for a whole autograph show thing. And then I'm going to New York City, where I'll be at the Laurie Beachman Theater on 42nd Street doing my one-woman show, Confessions. And then when I get back on May 13th, the lovely people at Radiant Health Services are giving me an award. They're having a lovely gala fundraiser dinner, which I just found out apparently is sold out. It's a huge, huge space down there in Orange County. Sold the whole thing out, and it's they've got all these cool people. They have they're calling it Club Radiant because it's like all 1970s themed and everything. It's going to be very cool. And they're giving out awards to more than one person. Who are we getting? Alison, Arngrim, and Tony. If you don't know, Tony Morrison is on. He's a producer for Good Morning America. Marvelous guy. So Tony and I are getting awards, and there's an auction, and it's very cool. It's a lovely high-end event. And Radiant Health Services has been around forever. They're one of the few HIV/AIDS service organizations that outlasted the 90s and stuck it out. And they're down there in Orange County helping people living with HIV.
That is amazing.
And that's a slow week for me. It's been a little slow. So, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like we haven't even gone to half of it yet. So,
yeah, that's just through May.
Yeah.
And I didn't tell you about my movie or my web series or my talk show or so. Yeah, there's a few things going. Oh, the book. I mean, that's what kind of really with the stage show, literary agent came to see my show and liked it. And in 2010, I released Confessions of a Prairie Bitch, How I Survived Nellie Olson and Learned to Love Being Hated through HarperCollins. And I wound up on the New York Times bestseller list, which blew my mind. And people are still buying the darn thing, which really impresses me that people still like it so much. So I have a book and a show and a talk show and a stand-up tour and a few things in my spare time. Yeah.
Oh man, it's kind of like, do you have any like hobbies that you like to do in your spare time?
Do you know that's what's funny is, of course, I love to cook and I've always cooked. And my character on the show, if you remember, was it couldn't cook. Nellie couldn't cook. So when your mother buys you the restaurant, it's all this, who's going to do the cooking? And so, of course, in real life, I do cook. I cook like mad. So I started doing cooking videos. So during the pandemic, I started reading to my fans. I said, well, what the heck? We're all stuck at home. Let's reread the Little House books. We'll reread the Little House on the Prairie book, starting at book 1, Little House in the Big Woods. And I'm still reading. In fact, later today, I'll be reading Laura Ingalls Wilder's Little House in the Ozarks, which is articles that Laura Ingalls wrote as an adult for like the Missouri Ruralist or the farm papers. So I'm still reading. I read most days. I was reading every single day all through 2020, 2021. And this caught on. And then I said, what do you guys want next? Because I wound up reading other books. I read Wizard of Oz and Anna Green Gables. They said, we want cooking videos. Cooking videos. So next thing you know, I'm in the kitchen with the camera wired up and I'm making scrambled eggs. It was a smash. They couldn't get it. So now there's a whole YouTube channel called Who's Going to Do the Cooking? And I'm working on a cookbook to help people who are intimidated and think they can't cook learn to actually cook.
Mm. Okay, yeah, I'm pretty sure that we could all use some. We can all pick up a little something, something when it comes
It's great.
to
Young
making
people in
dishes.
their first apartment, college students who haven't learned to cook and are away from home, or people who just said, "Oh no, I can't cook. It's too." They watch the cooking shows and they go, "I can't make that," and I don't have the $300 mixer, and I don't have the special pot and the pressure cooker. It's like, yeah, you need a pot, a pan, and like a knife. It's fine. You can totally make stuff. It's really easy.
Mm, I might actually look into that.
You should. So it's a great stuff on there. It's got great fun.
Yeah, and yeah, you've been doing all of this stuff. So how has the pandemic really I usually ask this for people that are still working in the industry, but how has it personally affected
You know,
at
I'm
least
still
your
working
work
in the
ethic?
industry. I
Yeah.
have a movie out, right? You know, I have a
Yeah.
movie out.
Yeah, so I was gonna ask, like, how has it really affected your work ethic? I mean, it kind of really hasn't. So, and
Right. I
also
can't
it can
work.
also
I made
extend.
a movie. I actually made a movie during it. I mean, that's the thing. I am still working. I have an agent and I work in film and web series. And I just, it was the craziest thing. That was the thing is I was booked when everything closed in March of 2020. I was booked through October. I had a whole series of gigs. I was performing in New York and France and all over the country, and I was booked all the way through October. And everything was canceled, all my flights and everything was just all shut down. And I had to, eat the plane tickets and everything. And I was devastated because one, I was out of work now, and two, well, all of my stuff involves direct contact with my fans. It's all stuff I do where I talk to people. I'm either at a little house event, historical thing, talking to the fans, or in an autograph thing, or in my stand-up act, I do question and answer segment, and it's audience participation. It's like, so everything I do, I'm like with people. And so that really upset me that I wouldn't be able to talk to people. And so I said, I got to do something. And I was literally sitting on my living room floor here and had like all the merchandise I was going to be selling at the events and stuff. And my husband said, don't worry, you'll think of something. You always think of something. And within a few days, I started this idea like, let me just read. I read, I should go back and reread the Little House books. It'd be good for me. And then I went, well, everybody else is stuck at home. So I started doing it. And then I had like 50,000 views. And then I did like the New York Times is calling to do an article about it. It was crazy. So many people started watching Little House on the Prairie again during the pandemic because it's like comfort food television and it made them feel good. And then everybody started baking bread and like acting like they were Ma Ingalls living on the prairie because they were going to make everything themselves. And it really caught on. And so people enjoyed it. And people really said, this is fun. Everything is so tense and I'm so distraught and everything's so hard. And people were out of work. People were sick. People were losing family members. They said, for an hour a day is Alison's reading a book. I'll go watch that. And it made people feel better and it made me feel better. So we did that. Well, then the guys who booked me into New York, my stage show, said some of our acts are doing these online things at stageit.com. Do you want to do it? And I go, what do you mean? Because will you do your show in your living room? Like, what? They said, no, it's pay-per-view streaming thing. It's totally a paid gig. It's in your living room. I'm like, Seriously. So next thing you know, we got the camera set up and a backdrop, and I'm doing my stand-up act in my living room, and people buy tickets and watch. I've been doing an online show through Stagia every month since. And now, of course, I'm back to live. I went back to live in 2021 in fall, and then we had the shutdown November, December, January, February, and now I'm back to live and doing online at the same time. Like I got the shows in all through April and May, and then probably June, I'll be back online. It's absolutely crazy. So I have the pay-per-view, and then I have this talk show where I would go down to the studio for the Alison Arngrim show every Tuesday night and interview different celebrities stuff. Well, the studio said, hey, we can't do that. Hey, we're doing it by Zoom. So now I set up, like, in fact, in this chair, this is where I set up, and I interview people, and I had on Michael Learned from the Waltons and all sorts of people who is now in a Netflix movie. And I interview all sorts of famous people now from my living room. So I kept the show, came back, and then I kept doing the stuff. So I kept doing everything. Then I get a call. This young woman, she's brilliant, Savannah. She calls me and says, okay, Savannah Osler, she said, she had made a movie, and I'd seen her movie, and she had hardly any money. And this movie was like really good. She said, I'm going to make a sequel, and you'll be in. I said, oh, sure. She calls me, said, I got the funding. I'm making this movie. I want you in. And I go, we're in the middle of a pandemic. And she said, yes. I have been told that everything I do is impossible. So why not do this as well? This is impossible. Everything else I've done was impossible. So next thing I know, I'm in Utah. I was flown to Utah. We were tested every other day, temperature checked several times a day. We ate lunch outside, every possible COVID precaution. It was like, a MASH medical unit out making this movie, and the extras would come in masks, and then they'd be like, you name it. It's like the camera was over there. We did absolutely, and no one got sick, not one infection. It was amazing. And we shot this in 2020. It's called Even Dreams. And she even got theatrical release. Who gets theatrical release with an independent film nowadays? She got full theatrical release nationwide, and now it's out on DVD and Blu-ray, and it's great. It's called Even in Dreams. And it's about a young girl in the music industry, but I play the evil, terrible manager who almost ruins her life, because that's kind of what I do. But yeah, I managed to make a movie. No, people were like, the whole thing shut down. I go, I just made a movie. I made a movie in the middle of the pandemic. And there's a web series I did a while back called Living on a Prairie that's hilarious. It's a whole send up where a woman is obsessed with Little House on the Prairie, and I actually play her therapist. So that's quite funny. That's still on. So yeah, but now I'm back doing the live shows. I went to New York in September, and I did club called Caveat. Plus I did the Rochester Fringe Festival. I did multiple shows there. And then I went to France, and I did like 6 shows of Le Mal au Trésor de Nellie Olson, just Nellie Olson's Trunk of Treasures. And we managed to get through that safely. And then, well, we had another spike, which my doctor told me is going to happen. And so now we're back again. And I'll be, as I said, I was just in Missouri, then Atlanta. Now I'm going to Missouri again, and then New York. And then I'm here for a while. Probably, I think it's Tennessee in August, and maybe France again in October. So I'm now alternating doing totally online from home stuff and live stuff. It's really, really crazy.
Yeah, you could definitely say that again.
Yeah. And that's the thing is that, I mean, I am still working. As I said, I've been touring. I spend like 4 months of the year in France, and I tour most of the year. And then when I'm in town, I do stuff. And of course, a lot of the work's out of town. I had to shoot Living in a Prairie in New York. I had to shoot Even in Dreams in Utah. But I absolutely, I'm still in the industry. As I said, I just made a movie. So I'm working. And then this all came to a giant screeching halt. And so I had to create. My living room is insane. Okay, here I am in this lovely little chair with this. Okay, we'll show you this craziness here. So over here, we have this huge backdrop. We have different backdrops. We have Halloween, we have Christmas, we have St. Patrick's Day, all kinds of themes. So I moved the furniture over. So that end of the living room is the living room. It has like the sofa and the television and the normal things. And this end of the living room is all lighting and backdrop and cameras, and is a studio for all of the junk that we're literally doing out of the house.
Nice.
And Cameo, that whole thing, Cameo, where celebrities go on the thing and they say, if people
Yeah.
buy a celebrity, go, hi, happy birthday, mom. I hear that. I signed up for that. I got mobbed. I don't know why people want Nellie Olson to for their Mother's Day present. Why people want Nellie Olson to talk to their mothers on Mother's Day, I'm not sure why, but I was absolutely swamped. So I'm on Memo and I'm on Cameo and a thing called Memo as well. So I'm on Memo, Cameo, a thing called Coach the World. Plus, yeah, that then working on the cookbook and the live shows and yeah.
Busy, busy, busy. Yeah.
No, yeah, I'm gainfully employed. No, I'm not retired. I am fully employed pretty much
There you
24/7.
go. Well,
Yeah.
there you go. So yeah, so let's talk about your early life for a little bit. So your father was actually a Hollywood manager. So did you
Yes,
feel
yes.
like him being a Hollywood manager kind of helped you get your foot into the industry since he was a manager? And I
Well,
guess it kind of runs in the family.
he didn't start as a man. He started as an actor originally. In fact, my father was on Broadway.
Okay.
He was in Luther with Albert Finney, and he was in Tamerlane, and all this stuff. He did all this stuff on Broadway, and my parents were kept there. And then my mother was an actress. She was the voice of Casper the Friendly Ghost and Gumpy.
Norma Macmillan. Yeah.
Exactly, huge in voiceover. All the books about people who did cartoons, she's like a whole chapter in there because she was everybody. She's Davy of Davy and Goliath. She was Gumby. And so they were all working. And so I was a little kid, and he had just started working as a manager when I was little. He switched over to management. He started working for Seymour Heller and Associates, who handled Liberace and Debbie Reynolds and all these huge stars. And he was assigned to Liberace, like the LA one. Like Seymour would go to Vegas with him, and we actually were told to go rent a house in the hills down the street from Liberace. So in case he needed something, I have no idea what. But this meant I got to go to Liberace shows as a kid, which was hilarious because my parents are like, don't say anything because no one must know that Liberace is gay. And I'm like, dude, I'm 8. I know he's gay. Come on, they know. Everybody knows, right? No, and hilarious. But Liberace was brilliant. He was one of the highest paid entertainers in the world. He was like gay Elvis. All his shows were sold out. He was enormously successful. Is just a brilliant man. But it was very crazy. The shows he did. So they were doing that, and I was starting to work a little bit as a kid. And my dad actually sat me down when I was about 11 and said, you haven't been working much lately. I'd done a movie at 10, but I wasn't really working when I was 11. And he explained that many child stars stop working around 11 or 12. And maybe they work as adults, or maybe they don't work again at all. But if they started at 5 or 6, it tends to plateau around 12, and gave me kind of the "your career is over" speech at 11. And then, of course, the next year I got Little House on the Prairie, which ran for 7 years. So we're like, surprise! Absolutely crazy. And then, so yeah, I auditioned all the time. And then it was a freak thing. I auditioned for the part of Laura. I auditioned for the part of Mary. I didn't get those. And then I auditioned for the part of Nellie. And I didn't know there was this villain character. I didn't know there was a Nellie. I hadn't read the books as a kid. I hadn't read the books. So I go and I read for Nellie. And of course, they hired me immediately. It was like, wait, what? And then it was a fabulous run. I mean, I became insanely famous at 12, and it worked out really well.
Yeah. And for your mother, Norma, you were right because she voiced characters like Casper, Gumby, Davy, Sweet Polly, Purebred. And these are all cartoons that this was from like my parents' generation from the 50s, 60s. And I actually did watch Casper when I was really young. And I actually didn't find out that it actually was her until like I pretty much. So what I like to do is I'm sort of am like a Wikipedia nerd where I go and research like actors and actresses, voiceover artists, like because as a kid, I didn't really think that like oh, so these are people that are actually doing this for a living. Like they actually
Right, it's a real
are getting,
thing. This is a job.
this is really like voiceover, like what? So then I started looking up folks like Mel Blanc, Doss
Yeah,
Butler, Tom Kenny,
Dawes.
Jim Cummings, and all of these big name voiceover artists that are recording in LA. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is an
My mom
actual
worked Dawes.
industry.
Dawes, that's who my mom worked with. Davy and Goliath. That's right. Dawes was the dog, was Goliath, and and my mother was Davy, and Davy's mother, and Davy's sister, and Davy's friends.
Wow.
And she worked with Dawes Butler several times. Yeah, that's one of the big ones. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that is very, very fascinating. I think I've read, I think I might have watched an another interview or a podcast. I mean, I think it was on your podcast where you mentioned that like I think you've worked with folks like and I've also had him on my podcast, Michael Bell, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh my God, I
Working.
studied with Michael Bell. Michael Bell, fabulous voice artist, used to teach a class. I probably still is. He taught an amazing class back, oh God, in the 80s and 90s. And I studied for months with Michael Bell. He was brilliant. I did not learn everything. I'll tell you the one thing I learned, because it was genius. Michael Bell had all these techniques. He talked about that when you're doing voiceover, don't pick a voice you can't do like all day. Because he taught us how to scream properly, how to do a pterodactyl, all these noises. He said, don't pick like some screaming character where you go, wow, this sounds great. And they go, great. Now we're going to have like 9 hours in the studio of you recording this stuff. We got to do all this stuff back to back. You'll be exhausted. You'll ruin your throat. He said, so pick something, a noise you can make easily. Train properly, train your voice so that you can do it because you're going to be doing it over and over again. And one of the things he taught us was how to a dog barking. And a dog barking underwater. Hysterical. So several different dog barks. And then he said, okay, dog underwater. He said, for underwater, people were doing stuff like taking a swig of stuff and gargling. He's like, no, that's not safe. So what you do is you just, so if you want to do a dog underwater, it's so yes, I can do it. That's what I learned from Michael Bell, how to do a dog underwater.
That's nice. So it's just pretty much kind of like
Yeah, if you talk a little, it sounds like and then you don't have to gargle or something ridiculous and drown in the middle of the studio.
Yeah, I think you mentioned something like that because you've also had on I think that was also one of the actually how I actually first checked out your work and then I started doing my research and homework before I had the guests on. So I listened to the podcast that you did, and you had one of the guests that you had on was Bob Bergen. And
yes, I love him.
yeah,
Porky
yeah,
Pig.
yeah, he's really great. And I've been a fan of Bob for a while, and then I listened to the podcast that you did with him, and I was like, oh, Alison's really cool. Yeah, and you guys talked a lot about like so much stuff and just learning about like I just learned something new with like the guests that people have on, like the guests that you have on, and just learning something new every time he's on a podcast.
I
So
had on Invader Zim Horowitz.
Richard Horvitz.
I had a
Oh
Richard Horvitz,
yes.
lovely guy. I met him at an autograph show, and I'm a huge Invader Zim fan and Pinky and the Brain and everything else. So I was like,
Oh my God. Yeah.
so absolutely. He actually emailed me and said, I've been watching your show. This is great. I'm like, shut up. Do you want to come on? Oh my God. So yeah, no, he hit me up because I met him and he's a lovely, lovely person. So yeah, I had Invader Zim on. I was so excited. And well,
Man.
Phil Proctor, who also did the, what was it? What the Wilburys or whatever that he did a bunch of cartoons. Phil Proctor, way back when I was young, was part of Firesign Theater, the comedy group, and did all the albums. And then he's been in many movies and TV shows, but he's also done huge voiceover and done a lot of cartoons now. So indeed, I got to have Phil Proctor on my show.
Yeah. I guess something that I've noticed about the voiceover artists is that they're just some of the nicest folks that you could ever meet. Like, seriously, they're just incredibly generous, and they just really love talking about and they're just so, you could just hear whenever you talk to these people that they have a genuine love, and just, they don't do it for the money. They just genuinely love the craft, and they just love performing. I asked this question when I was in a Facebook group, and I was asking, so did you guys get into this for the money or the fame, or did you generally get into this because you just genuinely love performing? And 9 times out of 10, it's, I just love acting. Any opportunity that I get, it's it just fills my heart with joy. It's my happy spot. It just helping me through a dark place. You just don't
My
really know.
mom loved it.
Yeah.
She'd done all kinds of, but the thing now, my mom was the way older generation. She started in radio because she'd been in theater. And when my parents moved to Toronto, they got into radio. So my mother was doing radio
I
plays in the
think Dawes also got us started in radio, if I'm not mistaken.
exactly. A
Yeah.
lot of them came from the radio generation. So they had done dramatic and comedic, actual like theater on the radio, and they were used to that. And so she had been in radio. And then when she was in New York, she was asked to come start doing like some voiceovers. And she, well, I did radio. What? Same thing. And for her, it was like job to job. Yeah, man. But then her big break, what totally freaked her and everyone out. My mom was asked to come in and do this comedy album because she did children's voices when she did radio plays. And the comedy album, this was revolutionary at the time. It was called The First Family. And ask your folks, they probably have this album. Everybody had this in their house. It was a comedy album about the Kennedys. And at the time, like now everybody does comedy sketches about presidents and their families. That's like every day. It's on Saturday Night Live.
Every
In
day.
1961, 62, people didn't do whole sketches. I mean, the comedian Von Meter did an impersonation in nightclubs of JFK, but the idea of doing a comedy album where you did sketches, not just about JFK, but about Jackie and Caroline and John and the whole family, that was considered really like cutting edge, like dangerous. Many record companies said, oh, no. People like him, and you got the kids on that. We can't do that. They were turned down by several record companies. And so my mother was the voice of little Caroline and little John, little baby John Kennedy Jr. And so she did the voices of the kids in these sketches. By today's standards, it was super nice. It was really soft. It wasn't mean at all. Today's standards, people go, this isn't mean. There's nothing mean in these sketches, please. But at the time, it's kind of shocking. Well, of course, finally one record company says, yeah, we're taking this. And it was the largest selling album in history. It was so huge. It blew. They were playing it in the supermarket. And suddenly my mother was terribly famous, and her phone rang off the hook. And then she was asked, would you like to come do Casper and Gumby and Sweet Polly Purebred with that? And suddenly she was everybody. I would turn on the cartoons when I was a kid in the 60s, and half of them were my mother. She was everybody. And she got, and then of course she really got in with like Art Clokey because she did Gumby and for years and did Prickle and all these other Prickle and Goo, and she was Goo, all these characters. So then when he did the Davy and Goliath stuff, except she was Davy. So she worked like mad. And I think her favorite really was Underdog, because Underdog was voiced by the actor Wally Cox, of all people, who, again, absolutely nicest person in the world. And my mother did like voiceover because the people she worked with were so nice. She never had any horror stories about, oh God, I had to work with so-and-so, boy, were they a pain. And whereas in theater, film, or TV, that sometimes happened. She said the voiceover people were all cool. And she got to work with Wally Cox. She loved all the people she worked with. And she was friends with other famous voice people. The funniest was, do you remember the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer the cartoon, the
Yeah.
claymation? Yeah, right.
I mean, who doesn't?
My mom was friends with the woman who voiced Rudolph. So we would get Christmas cards. And I'm a kid, and my mother comes to me with this Christmas card and goes, this Christmas card is from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. It's like, who gets Christmas cards from Rudolph? Herself. So yeah, so that was pretty cool. But yeah, exactly. She loved working in voiceover. The people she worked with, great. She got to work with Wally Cox.
Yeah, and that's not even mentioning the other great voiceover artists back from my parents' generation, like Dow. Who is it? Is it McKinnon? He also did like a lot of Disney stuff. I think he was also
So many people. There was just
yeah.
brilliant.
Paul
Well, and Chuck,
Freese. Yeah,
and Chuck McCann did so
yeah.
much voiceover, but then he did live stuff. And you know, when Chuck
Mhm.
McCann was in films and television, he often played a mute. He usually played someone who didn't speak, did deaf mute, and then he did voiceover primarily. So it was very bizarre. And Chuck McCann was on Little House on the Prairie, and he'd done voiceover. My mother had worked with him, and then he wound up on Little House in the episode about Tinker Jones, and he didn't say a word. He was played a guy who couldn't talk.
Yeah. And speaking of Chuck, I was recently, because I've been on like a classic nostalgia 80s and 90s animation kick. So one of the shows that I would watch is there was a show that was on the Disney afternoon from the 90s called Tailspin. So basically the show
I
was
love
about
Tailspin. Yeah.
yeah, on basically it has the Jungle Book characters, but it takes place in like from the 30s, 40s, where they were
Mhm.
air pilots. And it's actually,
I
I know
was
it sounds kind of
bananas.
silly, but yeah,
It was a
it's actually
very
really
silly
good
shot.
show.
It was like, okay, and the monkeys are flying a plane now. Okay, I have
Yeah.
no idea what's happening, but yeah, it was a very good cartoon.
Yeah, very underrated. I think Chuck played one of the lackeys to Jim Cummings' character, Don Carnage, which I think he was the bigger, like the gruffer, like one of the henchmen. Yeah, and I was like, oh my gosh, every word that he says, it just sounds like it's amazing how well he just plays like the big brawn sort of, but not too. What? How can I say
You have
this?
to be such a good actor to do voiceover. That was the
Yeah.
thing that Michael Bell talked about in his class, and my mom talked about. She was like, acting's acting, and a lot of the said old school came from the radio plays. So you don't act like, oh, well, I'm voiceover. You're not focusing on the microphone. You're not saying, oh, well, they're only going to hear me. You're doing the full performance. Do you remember there was articles about, oh God, and all the interviews, the guy who played the crab in The Little Mermaid, when he
Samuel
went
Wright.
when he went to the audition and the whole under the sea thing and everything,
Uh-huh.
he didn't know that it was for a cartoon, because well, Disney, it was like all these NDAs, don't tell anybody what audition. It was all, everything was top secret. So he
Oh.
gets there and he's like, what am I auditioning for? We're in, we have a thing, we have a song. And he didn't know, they would not tell him what's the project. Is it a movie? Is it a cartoon? We can't tell you. We can't tell you. We can't tell you. So he gets him, there's a song and all this under the sea. He thought it was perhaps for Disney Cruise Lines. And he thought, oh, sounds like a commercial for the cruise ship.
I
Maybe it's
mean,
that
like,
cool.
I mean,
So,
I know they
you
probably
know,
did something like that for the cruise ships. I know they
so
actually did
he
do something like
starts
that.
dancing. So he does it like it's a Broadway number and sings and dances and just blasts it out, just blows out the walls and does this whole number. And of course, Doug gets the job, blows their mind. And then they were like, well, it's totally voiceover, but do that. Do not do anything different when we record. And you've seen the old film footage of Mel Blanc when he was doing Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck.
Uh-huh.
He's running around, or they had to put the mic, they had like hang it from the ceiling because he's bouncing all over the room.
And you hear the reverb everywhere.
Mhm. He's like fully, it's a full body thing. There's
Oh
no
yeah.
just like ta 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 ta. It's serious business. So yeah, no, that was the thing that I learned from my mother and from Michael Bell about voiceover, that no, it's you're going all out. It's, which is why
Yeah.
it's cool.
And it's interesting that I'm pretty sure not a lot of people also know this, but like Daffy and Sylvester, like Daffy is literally Sylvester's voice, just sped up. And yet Daffy still sounds like a distinctly different character. I mean, you still got the lisp and this, and Sylvester is more, I mean, it's more like a slobbery sort of voice, but Daffy is more of a lisp type of voice. So
Really
when you
wanna,
really speed it
yeah.
up, it's I mean, for some reason, you can't really tell that, like, okay, so Davy and Sylvester, totally different, distinct characters, but it's all in the acting, man.
Oh, you got to
It's
get into
definitely,
this thing. I'm into it. Spurdvac. It's called Spurdvac, and it's Sperdvac. It's Society for the Preservation, et cetera, et cetera, radio drama and comedy, et cetera. It's people. Some of them are very old who did old radio. Some of them are younger people who've done a lot of voiceover. Phil Proctor's in the club. I'm in it, and what they do is they do recreate old radio shows. And we did like George Burns and Gracie Allen stuff. And I did Gracie Allen for several of them. And then we were doing stuff live on stage with the old fashioned microphones, but now we've been doing them online. And I just did a thing with the character of Baby Snooks, which is it's Greg Oppenheimer, whose dad worked on I Love Lucy, wrote I Love Lucy. So we did Baby Snooks, which was the character that Fanny Brice played 1,000 years ago. Well, he explained the other night when we were doing this, he said, Lamb Chop, the puppet Lamb Chop. I'm like, yeah, Shirley, the thing in the thing. Yeah, Sherry Lewis and Lamb Chop. The voice of Lamb Chop is exactly the same as the voice of Baby Snooks. I'm like, stop it. He goes, no, we did a thing where we had her come in, the woman who did the lamb chop, they come in and do baby. And she's like, it's the same. Baby Snooks, and go listen to Lamb Chop the Puppet, and go on YouTube and listen to old Baby Snooks, and Lamb Chop and Baby Snooks sound almost exactly the same.
wow. Yeah.
So
And
yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and part of the reason that I actually wanted to do this is because there's a lot of, like I said, great voiceover artists and actresses from days of old, like June Foray and a bunch of other ones. So I just wanted to give Norma Macmillan a special kind of fitting like a tribute by actually talking to the daughter of Norma because I feel like Norma is really one of the most underappreciated of the voiceover
Yeah.
artists that worked um not I can't say the golden age, but like
Yeah.
back in the my parents' generation because
Yeah,
she
Gold,
played a
Golden Age of
lot of
cartoons because
characters.
it was
Yeah.
like that late 50s and all through the 60s. And the
Yeah.
60s for cartoons were just a huge, just fantastic. And so she did a
Yeah.
lot. And she dubbed some movies too, which is crazy. She dubbed actually some famous people in films. Um, and then she returned to doing live stuff. In her 60s, she started doing commercials and movies. Did you ever see the movie Big Business with Lily Tomlin and Bette Midler?
Big business.
So, but they play the
I've heard.
twins who get mixed up. My mother plays the nurse who mixes up the twins at the beginning of the movie. And she's in a bunch of comedy films. So in late in life, she went back and did tons of television and film and did on camera stuff. So
That's
yeah,
very interesting.
so
Yeah.
my mother had like 4 careers. She had a theater career, she had a radio career, she had a voiceover career, and then she went back and did commercials, television, and film.
That's awesome.
She literally did everything.
The jack of all trades.
Yep.
Yeah. So because you mentioned you got your start as a child model and actress, and then of course you were on Little House of Prairie. So you auditioned for Laura, and then later it was Mary, and then you got the part of Nellie because I guess they saw something in you that they decided, okay, you know what, kid, we'll just put you up. Well, you're playing Nellie right on the
I
spot.
just now it was because it was that first episode and really great scenes in the first episode, Country Girls, where it's I don't think the country girls have a penny. But the killer part, and people still do talk about the scene. People who watch reruns go, oh my God, I love the scene where everyone's doing their essays. And of course, Nellie is talking about her house. My home is the best home in all of Walnut Grove. And all she talks about is how much everything cost in the house. It's hysterical. And at one point she says, we have 3 sets of dishes, one for every day, one for Sunday, and one for when someone very special and important comes to visit, which we've never even used yet, which is hilarious. Hi, you don't know anyone important, no one is coming, and you have these stupid dishes. So it's very funny stuff. And like I said, it was so totally blindsided. I didn't know what I was getting into, and they hand me these sides. And I mean, it was you're a child actor of a certain age. Everybody read for Laura. I always said it was like the search for Scarlett O'Hara for 8-year-olds. Everybody read for Laura Ingalls Wilder, so they had everybody through. But then they said no, she needs to be reading for Nellie, and they had me in. And when I read this script, I turned to my father and said, this girl's a bitch. And my father said, what are you talking about? And of course, I read it for him. He starts cracking up laughing. He says, don't change the thing. You read it exactly like that. And I did. I went in and there was Michael Land and the other producers, and they started laughing hysterically. And they said, could you do it again? I said, sure. What do you want me to change? And they said, nothing. Just read the thing about the house again. So my home is the best home in all of Walnut Grove. And they cracked up. And that day, we weren't even all the way home. They called my agent and said, no, she has the part. I immediately, like after the door closed behind me and they were calling my agent and hiring me. And I just never, that's just one of those Hollywood stories where it's like, I walked in, I did it, nailed it. And I was just so surprised. I was like, wait, I got the villain part. What happened just now? And then of course I was there for years and it was so much fun. I'm so glad that I didn't get the part of Laura or Mary and that I got Nellie. I would have been a little bored if I'd had to be the nice person for 7 years. I was much more satisfied playing the rotten person.
I mean, hey, like it became a cultural icon for the spoiled Batgirl throughout the 70s.
Yeah, that's what's crazy. People now, we're coming up on our 50th anniversary in 2024, which is only 2 years from now. Little House on the Prairie will be 50 years old, and there'll be huge celebrations and all these events are being planned and stuff. But it's been almost 50 freaking years, and it's still in reruns all over the world. I'm getting checks from Germany and France. And yes, everyone always, it's one of the big questions. You still get it? Yes, Little House on the Prairie, because we started in 1974, was when the in perpetuity clause for residuals kicked in. With Screen Actors Guild, got it to be perpetual. So many people who had shows right before Little House do not still get paid, or they got paid for so many runs and then it just stopped, or they got nothing. Little House started in 74. If I get hit by a bus, my husband will get checks. I still get residuals for things my mother did. I have a State of Norma Macmillan checks that come. So they're much smaller, but what people don't realize with residuals is every time they run it, the amount goes down a little bit. So for the first few years of residuals, it's based on your whatever you got paid. That's great. Residuals are fabulous for the first few years, but it goes tick, 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 tick. It's been 50 years. Some of these checks are just not that big. They really come down, but by God, they still send them. They still put them in an envelope and put a stamp on them and send them. So I appreciate that. I love that they're still happening. And I love that the show's on in every language in every country on earth. And it's great. And I would say, yeah, the first 5 years of residuals were truly amazing and fabulous. But then after that, no, you couldn't possibly. You can't live at 50 years. You're lucky if you get $1.98 an episode, really.
Man, I also like how you describe playing Nellie as like having PMS for 7 years in one of your many stand-up
Really?
routines that you do.
So angry. This girl was so angry. But that's the thing. I mean, look at her mom. I mean, she had to deal with Mrs. Olson, and she had that idiot brother, and her father wouldn't stop her mother from being awful. And I think it was just very, very hard on her. And so she was jealous of Laura. Laura had the perfect family, Ma and Pa and baby Carrie and her ma, who was perfect. And Nellie had Mrs. Olson. And I think that it made her mad and she was jealous. But the amount of rage, which I enjoyed, because it really, I mean, talk about relaxing. You get it all out of your system by the end of the day.
Yeah, and you've won so many rewards, but I think the one that I actually really do love is the character most in need of a timeout, which
it's on
I
my
mean,
is on the mantelpiece right here, TV Land. I don't have an Emmy. I don't have an Emmy now, but I have a TV Land award. I have a TV Land award for character most desperately in need of a timeout, and I have to say I am very proud.
you should
You
be.
remember that whole thing when Sally Field got her Oscar, and actually she was so excited she just blurted out, "You like me, you really like me," and everyone's like, "What? What
Yep.
is wrong with you?" And everyone kind of laughed at her. So when I got the TV Land Award, I went, "You hate me, you really, really hate me."
Yep. I mean, that
No, I
just
was
perfectly
thrilled.
sums it up.
It's engraved because they said with TV Land, because people don't take the TV Land Awards very seriously. So they said sometimes people don't even take their award home. And I went, no, I want it engraved, and you put my name on it, and you put and I'm taking it out, and it's on the mantle. You bet. I'm proud of that.
Yeah. So, like you said earlier, you did the comedy album. Is it Here's Amy?
That's right. Here's it. So weird. Again, like the first family album with the Kennedys of its time. It's
Yeah.
so odd. It's like I remember I listened to it again a couple of years ago and went, okay, there's some sketches that sort of hold up. Because they re-released it. The guy, Uproar Records. There had been Laugh Records was the company with this guy Dave Drozen who did it, and then he's still around. So he started thinking Uproar. So the thing's out on iTunes, you get like on CD or on iTunes, and I thought, oh my God, that thing is like a dinosaur. There's a couple sketches that are still funny now that still sort of make sense. But I think the rest of it is just going to be like whoosh because it's like so 70s. But the gag was, here we were in the 1970s when Jimmy Carter was president, and he had a cute blonde daughter named Amy. And here I had long blonde hair, and we were trying to come up with things to do in my act because I was 15, 16 years old and doing stand-up. And then somebody said we should do something about Amy Carter, because that would be very funny. Amy's perspective, this lovely, very nice, innocent child's perspective on all the craziness in Washington. And so I was like, I got these huge glasses, and it was like, and it was very silly. So we started doing just little teeny little bits, just little things, a gag at the end of my act, like Amy says. Well, people liked it. So then these writers, this comedy group, the Village Idiots, who all went on to huge things. I mean, Jan Fisher wrote The Lost Boys. Peter Jurasik is a big star. They all did very well. Well, I met with them, And we found a guy who did a really great, a guy, Greg Sudduth, who did a brilliant Jimmy Carter impression. And we got together at Laugh Records. And we wound up doing this album. We had my mom guest star. She played a couple characters. And we said, okay, this is a great press thing. Because Norma Macmillan played Caroline Kennedy, and ha ha ha, Alison's now going to play Amy Carter on an album. So we thought this would be sort of clever to do. And we did it. And it's kind of funny. It was not a big seller. It was not a big seller like the first family. I don't know if anyone has a copy of this. It's a huge collector's item, you have a rare thing. But they've re-released it. Some of it is still funny. Some of it is, I think, sounds really hokey and weird. And yeah, but by God, I did it. So yeah. And how many people can say, yeah, I put an album out when I was, 15. So I guess I did all right.
There you go. Yeah, and you've also guest starred in shows like The Love Boat, Fantasy Island, and you were a panelist. What was that one show on NBC? Was it Hollywood
Everything.
Smash?
I did everything. I did all the game shows in the 80s. Game shows were huge. And I did a game show, and they found out that I was good at it.
Hollywood Squares. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
it.
well, Hollywood Squares. It was when I wanted to be on the real Hollywood Squares, because there was the Hollywood Squares, and it was on like 3 different versions. But there was a thing they did with Match Game. They combined them. So you had Gene Rayburn hosting Match Game, and then the guy who was Bowser and Sha-Na-Na hosted the Hollywood Squares portion. It was very crazy. So it was like half Match Game, half Hollywood Squares, with the same celebrities switched out. So I got to do that version of Hollywood Squares. I was on that a couple of times, and then there was a thing called Crosswits. There was a thing, it was crossword puzzles. There was a whole bunch I did a bunch of game shows, and I was good at them. I won people, as a celebrity, you just get paid a flat fee, but you win people money. And these contestants are betting on me. And I got people trips to Hawaii and refrigerators and washing machines. I was so proud that I won people all this money. I was like, bet on me, I'll get you the trip to Hawaii. So I love doing game shows. I did a bunch of those. And recently, Harlan Pohl, my publicist, and a bunch of the people who originally produced Hollywood Squares got together with the originals, because Peter Marshall's still alive. They got Peter Marshall and John Davidson and a bunch of people who had hosted Hollywood Squares, and did an online version. They did it for charity, and they got all these celebrities who had been on Hollywood Squares. They got Rich Little, and they got practically everybody was still alive to come on. They got Bruce Valanche, all these people, and they did an online version of Hollywood Squares. We were in our homes with the thing, but when you saw it on the screen, it was the whole Hollywood Squares set with all of us in the little square. It was genius, and I got to play Hollywood Squares online.
That's awesome. And it's really interesting how you said earlier that you had a successful career on stage in France, and I've always would love to visit France someday, because one thing about me, I guess that's one thing that I really do miss about since the pandemic is I love to travel.
Right?
I like to travel around. I would love to travel around the world, but yeah, but hopefully someday, fingers crossed, knock on wood,
Wave,
that will eventually.
we have these waves, like when I was booked.
Definitely.
I was supposed to go in March of I had just done a bunch of shows in January of 2020. I'd just come home in the beginning of February 2020. People were just saying, hey, and I did a thing in Arkansas, and everyone was just saying, I think this is serious, and I think that people are starting to get it here. Of course, they were sick. We just didn't realize how bad it was hitting. But people said, yeah, there's this thing, and there's people in China, and now it looks like other countries, and they're getting really sick, and I think it's here. Maybe we should. But by the time Charlotte Stewart, who played Miss Beadle on the show, and we were in a thing in Arkansas. And during the autograph show, people stopped literally during that, said, I think we need to stop shaking hands, and maybe you could take a picture from that side of the table. And suddenly the alcohol wipes came out. And Charlotte and I found out there was a bathroom, a ladies' room right near our table that nobody knew about. It was like behind the curtain. So we said, oh my God, we have our own bathroom. We were washing our hands like every 5 minutes. And we said, this is a problem. This sounds like it's really bad. And like literally it was just happening. And we freaked out. We get home. And then we find out, here's what's happening, and here's this disease, and it's a virus, and here's what's going on. Of course, my husband, Bob had run the Southern California AIDS hotline. So we had some experience, and we had done a lot of AIDS education with what do you do when there's a brand new disease that people don't understand, that is very frightening and is deadly, and you have to tell people how to, this sounds familiar. We did this in the 80s. So as Bob said, it's not our first plague. We'll get through this. And then in March, everything, stopped. And I had been going to France like that, so I couldn't go in all of 2020. And then we were going to do spring of 2021. Uh-uh. And then we were able to do fall of 2021. We were able to go in October. And my doctor said, yes, you'll make it to New York in September. You'll make it to France in October. But November, December, and January, you might want to think about as vacation. I said, what are you saying? He says, well, this is how these things go. We're going to have an upswing. And you saw we had a terrible, terrible upswing of peaking cases in the winter. And my doctor just said, oh, April, you're going somewhere in April. April is good. I said, great. After that, he went, like, oh, that's not good. So that's what you do. You play the numbers. You play the numbers. You got your mask. You got your thing. There's a vaccine. You play your numbers. You say, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm not going to do this. This is too dicey. And you figure out, you navigate. So since 2020, I have been able to do a live show in New York. I have been able to do shows in France. I have been able to make a movie. I have been able to go to a couple of live autograph shows, but I've done online autograph shows. I've done online stand-up. I've done online, and I'm about to go do a bunch of live stuff. And then I'm going to come back and I'm do some online. So if come this summer, numbers are down and things are great, I'll go jump on a plane. And if they're not, I will fire up the internet and we'll just do it all here in the living room. So it's this constantly having to adapt, which is crazy and was really, really scary at the beginning, but we did it. But I've been going to France now for 6 years. You would love it. You should go. It is great. Just, check with your doctor and check the numbers at some point.
Oh yeah.
Put on
Oh
a
yeah.
hazmat
Yeah.
suit and hold your breath on the plane, whatever. It's just, you can do and get there. It's really great. And I do the show usually in smaller towns. I mean, I stay in Paris at a friend's in Paris. It's amazing. But then I get on a train and we go out to the countryside, the French countryside, to little villages, places where tourists don't really go. And I do my show there. So I get to see parts of France out in the provinces and places that nobody gets to go to. And I get to eat the regional food and the cheese and meet people. It's really cool. And the audiences are great. And of course, it's really great. They love Little House. La Petite Maison dans la Prairie est très, très populaire en France. Little House on the Prairie it started really early, like still in the 70s. They didn't even wait to the 80s. They started rerunning Little House on the Prairie in France very early on, every day at noon, at lunchtime. And French people traditionally go home at lunch. And they certainly were then. They're still in some places do now. So the whole country took lunch off and sat there and watched Little House on the Prairie, like the whole country for the last 40 odd years. And they're mad for Little House on the Prairie. And so when I went there to do a talk show, I found out what a following I had. And I said, I do something. And I met this guy, Patrick Loubatière, and he said, we could write a show. And next thing I know, I'm doing a whole comedy show in French. And now it's been going, we have the second show, Mal au Trésor, and they can't get enough of it. And it's great because then I get to go to France for weeks at a time. I'm working, I'm getting paid, I have a job in France. I'm learning better French. I'm working as an actress. I'm on stage. I'm meeting my fans. And I'm traveling all over France and eating all the escargot and the cheese and the champagne and the chocolate mousse. And it's freaking amazing.
Yeah, I definitely would love to go to France someday.
So
Like we said, yeah, as we discussed, it depends on the numbers and the doctors and whatnot, but yeah,
I
France
meet
is
with my
definitely
doctor. I go to my doctor. Actually, usually have I'm having like my annual physical where I sit with the doctor, go, okay, I get out the thing. Here's where I'm supposed to be. Here's where I have planned. Where I'm supposed to go here. Should I go here? Should I go? I sit down with my doctor. We actually do my schedule.
nice. Yeah, that's pretty nice. You got to make sure that your health, make sure that you're consistently in good shape, your health is very good, and you just got to make sure that you take care of yourself, and then because you just want to protect yourself.
I'm vaxxed. I'm absolutely.
Oh
I've
yeah.
got 4 shots now. I actually weirdly got a J&J when it started. Now everyone's like, "Boo, the J&J is no good." Actually, the J&J was not terrible, but the
I've
Pfizer's
heard
better.
Moderna was actually that's the one that
Moderna,
people have.
Moderna really does, or the Dolly Parton
Yeah,
vaccine, as I like to call it. Moderna kicks butt. Moderna is very powerful. I might get, maybe I'll get a Moderna next. I don't know. But I've now had one
maybe.
J&J and three Pfizer. So like I have Spider-Man antibodies at this point. And I take care of my health, and I take my vitamins, and I have a good immune system, and I try to get exercise. And so I try, it's like I
Same
try to
here.
check all the boxes, and I wear the mask, and I wash my hands, and I try to stay outdoors if there's a crowd. I basically, I do everything. I go, what do you got? Yeah, I'll do that too. And so I try everything, and so far so good.
It's pretty much me in a nutshell for these last
That's
2 years.
it.
Yeah.
But I
Yep.
wasn't about to stop like living. That's the thing, is like when I sat to say,
Exactly.
okay, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? And I started reading, and the next thing I knew, I had this whole sudden like life on the internet that was completely crazy. I never anticipated. And then when they said, okay, well, you can come in person, here's what we're gonna do. And I went, okay, I think we can do that. And I called the doctor, can I do that? Yeah, you can do that. And so I went, okay, we'll go here. Okay, now back in the house. Now we go here, back in the house. And so I've been just navigating this maze of how do I continue to like do stuff. I mean, I can now get my nails done and hair done. When I couldn't go, when the beauty parlor was closed, couldn't get my hair done, I did my own hair. I thought, nope. I colored my own hair. I cut my own hair. I did my own nails, and I did what I had to do to make sure I still look good when I went on the video. I thought, I'm going to just keep going. And then my husband continued to work because he works for a company. They're building the people mover at the airport, so that's infrastructure. That's transportation. So he's like, nope, we're still. And he said, but it's great. There's hardly anyone there. I'm like practically alone in the office. So I'm like, oh, perfect. You're safe there. Go. So this crazy just navigating, and it's very difficult. Some people didn't have the good fortune to be in a position to do that. Some people were just stuck. They had their job, and their job went bye-bye, and they were stuck at home, and they did not have any resources or alternatives. And I've had friends who are in that position, and we've tried to help people out. And it's been horrifyingly difficult for a lot of people. But I was extremely lucky in that I had good internet. I was able to do any of this stuff. But every day, it's a new series of adaptations and navigations of how we're going to all get through this.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, I mean, you look great. I'm just gonna say
Thank you,
that right now. Yeah. So yeah, in addition, you devote your time to donate charity,
Mhm.
donate to charities, particularly for like people who struggle with yeah, just a lot of illnesses, but yeah,
AIDS and
philanthropy.
child abuse too. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I know this is like especially been a difficult time. So yeah, could you tell us a little bit about like, your charitable
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
time in charitable
Starting in
organizations?
the 80s, I started doing a lot of AIDS education stuff for AIDS Project
Yeah,
Los
AIDS.
Angeles.
Yeah.
And there was a group also called Tuesday's Child. I was there in their form, which targeted families, people who had children with AIDS. Because remember in the 80s, you still had people who got it from blood transfusions. And sometimes a mother giving birth might need a blood transfusion, or a baby would need a transfusion. And at that time, also women who were infected, there were no drugs a woman who's pregnant could take to stave off infection in the baby. That's a thing now. If you're pregnant and you're HIV positive, you can go to the doctor and they can prevent the infection. They couldn't do that then. And now the blood is all screened and tested and checked. That wasn't then. So there was an enormous number of children with AIDS. And it was a major crisis. And the problem, too, was many of the organizations that helped people with HIV and AIDS and provided services to them did not have the capacity, or as we say nowadays, the bandwidth to help children. They say they had a food bank. They didn't have Pampers. They didn't have diapers and baby wipes. They didn't have baby food. They didn't have formula. Who was doing this? They didn't have events for children with AIDS. There were events for children with cancer and life-threatening diseases, often thrown through the hospitals. They wouldn't let families with children with HIV and AIDS come to them. They wouldn't have them there. Really rough. Families whose child had AIDS, or families where the mother had AIDS and was trying to take care of her well children, were ostracized by their other family members, thrown out of the house. It was brutal. So this guy, Barry Horton, I put together, and he said, I want to start something for these kids. I said, okay. So we did everything. We saw to it they got food, supplies. We started a whole children's like food bank and supply thing. So all the diapers or whatever they needed, help them get housing if they needed it, hook them up with other agencies that help them with things, basically all possible services. And through the best Christmas party you ever saw, started with like 20 kids, and by the time I left it was like 450. So we did what we could for these and for their siblings, because like the one child's sick and the brothers and sisters get nothing, so, oh yeah, we got presents, but just for the sick kid, we're not giving you anything. Like, that's cruel. So we made sure everybody in the family got stuff. Just do it. We tried to bring some normalcy to these people's lives, and we did. And so I did that for a long time, and of course, and then the speaking engagements all over the country about AIDS education, how to prevent it, etc., how to help your friends. Then some years ago, I was approached by a group called the National Association to Protect Children, which is a child abuse organization, child abuse prevention group. And what we've been doing for years now is legislative stuff, legal stuff, because what happens is you have all these services now for people who've been abused as children, but the ball would get dropped. The police would arrest the guy, they'd have the evidence, the kid would testify, the kid would go, and they'd be convicted, but there'd be loopholes in the law where someone who had sexually abused a child would go free, serve no jail time. And we said, okay, yeah, no, there's something really wrong with this picture. And we've changed laws all over the country. Also, funding. There's different police departments in each city. They have a thing called the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, called ICAC. Every big police department has an ICAC team. These are the police who go online. And well, if you remember, like Jared from Subway, hello, the people who are trafficking in child sex abuse images, the people who are trafficking children, these guys, this is the police team who finds those people and stops them and arrests them. And we found out they were not receiving appropriate funding. They were lacking manpower. They were in need of technology manpower. They were being outgunned, outman. We got them the technology. We lobbied in Washington to see to it that they got their funding restored. And we started a training program to train people to go work for them. This is huge stuff. And we're still doing some of that. We're expanding it now for all kinds of things for kids that are good for kids' mental health, physical health, and especially with the pandemic, a lot of online education stuff. We're looking at music and arts programs, because children who study music and arts do better in school and have better mental health outlook and everything else. So we're expanding to all kinds of services for children, as well as the legal thing of making it a level playing field for victims. I'm president of the National Association to Protect Children.
Awesome. That is really awesome.
So you said, do I have any hobbies? I'm like,
so
sleeping?
I guess that counts as sleeping too.
I occasionally stop to eat and sleep. Does that count as a
I mean, I had breakfast before this, and
right. And
yeah,
this thing, right, and so
the most important meal of the day, folks.
It is. I had some peanut butter. So this thing on May 13th in Orange County, and it's fabulous. But I would say quit buy a ticket, but I just found it's completely sold out. It's completely sold out, as it should be. As I said, it's just, and it's really, Thelma Houston's performing, for heaven's sake. I'm there, and this guy Toni Morrison's there, and it's really going to be a nice event. They throw a very nice event. They're having a big auction, and they've got like some trips and like super massive prizes. It's going to go on all night, and it's a whole 70s theme. It's going to be like, a whole like disco thing, and it's going to be really fun. And they're going to raise a huge amount of money for this organization that is in Orange County and serves really all of Orange County, just thousands and thousands of people, families, kids, everybody, adults who are dealing with HIV and AIDS and prevention. They have a whole medical clinic. So they're not only providing like the social service, but they have a medical clinic providing medical care. And they also have all that stuff, like they talk about PrEP, the drugs that people can take that lowers their viral load so that they don't transmit HIV. So they're doing the preventative stuff so people don't get AIDS. They're helping people who already have AIDS. They're providing all manner of health service to people. They've even dealing with COVID and helping people. So they're a really cool organization, and they've been there just forever. And there you go. We were supposed to do this in, I guess, January? No, last fall. I forget. We were supposed to do this event months ago. And yes, it got canceled by the pandemic. So now it's happening on May 13th. And it's really going to be cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for your podcast, your own podcast, which self-promotion time. So yeah. So tell us how that podcast came to be, and what have been some of your favorite memories and experiences upon, hosting your own little platform so far?
Well,
What's your best memory?
everybody was like bugging me, going, "Why don't you get have a show? You got to have a show." And I would
Probably
get
do.
interviewed on I was on everybody else's podcast, right? I was on everybody else's podcast, so I was getting interviewed by everyone. There were like two main stations in LA that were doing this thing, and I was on everybody's. And every time I came in, someone would say, "Do you want to have a show here? Do you want to have a show here? Do you want to have a show here? Would you like a show here?" And finally, I went and talked to the guy at UBN Go, and he was like, "Finally, yes, please have your show here." So it's like, what do I call it? The Alison Arngrim Show. And right away, I mean, first I had a bunch of people from Little House on the Prairie on for the opening show. But then I talked to Harlan, my publicist. He has everybody. He has everybody. So I said, who do you got? I'd like to come on. Let's start. And so, Michael Learned and all of these wonderful people. I've had everyone on. I've had, Marty Croft. I've had Rich Little. I've had all these wonderful people on. And as you know, yes, a lot of the fabulous voiceover people, Bob Bergen. I've had just amazing people on, and some of them are very, very famous people. As I say on the Alison Arngrim Show, we talk about things that make you feel good, the movies and TV shows that made you feel good, and the people who made them. But I also have new people. I'll have people who have written a book that maybe nobody's heard of yet, that are really interesting, fascinating authors, or people who are doing something really, really cool, a new project, a theater piece or something, that are not getting the play they should. As I said, it's also about people who are doing things now to make the world a better and more interesting place. So I'll have on artists, graphic artists and writers, and really, really cool people, as well as fabulous celebrities that we love from back in the day. And it's a conversation. We just start talking. And I mean, I had Kate Linder on. I got to have her back on. I just went to an event last night. Kate Linder, she was on Young and the Restless. So she's still on Young and the Restless. Esther, she started as Esther the maid. She literally started, she had one line. She got the job. She had one line. Dinner is served with the maid. They had her back. It became kind of recurring. She has now been on Young and the Restless for, I am not making this up, 40 years. And we just went to a party last night to celebrate Kate Linder's 40th year on Young and the Restless, which started out as a one-line part that she parlayed into a 40-year career. She's an amazing person. Everything she does is for charity. She's really, really sweet. And she's been on the TV for 40 years. I had her on my show, and we just had the most intimate conversation about life. It was really, really cool. I had on Tony Tennille. I had on Joan Van Ark. I had on Peter Marshall from the original Hollywood Squares. I've just had on the most amazing people.
Yeah. And for your podcast, I will say that it's a very good, resource that you could look into, especially, because I know that a lot of people out there are really struggling in the midst of these, COVID times and whatnot. And also there's the social unrest that is going on, and also wars that are going on. So they kind of
really
need something
awful.
to,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So they kind of want to tune into something that is oh my God, I just kind of want to tune out of reality. And I just want to find something that is really positive and uplifting. Just so much.
There
Yeah.
are nice people who are doing good things. There are people who are helping
Exactly.
people
Yeah.
in Ukraine. There are people who are helping people who are sick and suffering. There are people helping people who are stuck with COVID and at home and can't pay their rent. There are
Bob
people
Bergen
helping
is
these
an
people.
example. Yeah.
Exactly. And there are people who are absolutely out there helping people. And there are people who spend every day doing things to make the world a better place, who actually are concerned about others and helping. And many of them, some of them are the stars, like Loretta Swit and all the things she does for charity, all these marvelous people. And there are good people in the world, and there are people who are doing good and positive things, and everything isn't all negativity and insults and backstabbing. And that's my show, is about feeling good and talking about, well, how can we help, how can we make this better than it is, what can we do? And that's the people I have on. It's really fun.
Yeah. And yeah, and how long have you been doing the podcast for?
It's God, it's over 2 years, because I think I was going for
Okay.
like a good year before pandemic hit. Yeah.
Okay, that is, yeah, you've had a lot of impressive people on your little show. So yeah, it's just really
Oh yeah,
interesting
thank you.
talking to them and just hearing, the different insights on just life and what is it about these shows, movies, any media that we consume and watch. That's pretty much what I do for my podcast. It's we talk about different subjects. So it's so what is it about this particular franchise or property that really makes you, that really feels your, that is your happy place? What is it that really makes you feel like you have it helps you express yourself creatively, and it helps you express yourself and use your voices to uplift others?
Yeah, well, the
And
people who come on, as I said, it's often the comfort TV. People who say, well, what makes you feel good? As I said, during the pandemic, the number of people started rewatching Little House on the Prairie, and the Waltons,
they started
and
rewatching a lot of shows.
they watch the old shows that made them feel safe. And they
Yeah.
also watch shows that were about people who were struggling. The Waltons depicted a family who had nothing and were going through the Great Depression and were terribly poor and trying to survive. The Little House on the Prairie show is about a family, the Ingalls, who have absolutely nothing. And frankly, the 1870s, there was a recession and people were not doing very well. And the Ingalls were constantly poor and at the mercy of the environment. And we had an episode called Plague. We had an episode called Quarantine. We had
Yeah.
episodes
Oh my
about
gosh,
pandemics and
yes.
quarantine, where people were, this was a thing that happened. So here they watch this family who are in far worse circumstances than anything you're going to be in now. And they're sticking together as a family, and they're getting through it, and they're relying on each other. How do they get? So people say, well, I'm going to go back and watch that show and see how the heck they got through this. And that's why people started turning to things like cooking and making crafts and making bread, anything, and watching these people who, because so many people were impacted, just devastated financially by what happened, the pandemic, so many people out of work. But they go back and they go, I'm going to go back and watch these people who had even less than I do now. And they
Yeah.
somehow made it through the life and in this show. And they're based on real people who had nothing. The Ingalls were a real family. The Waltons is based on that guy who wrote it, Daryl Hamner's childhood. So people turn to that. And they didn't really want to watch a lot of stuff about rich people stabbing each other and bitching at each other and telling everyone how awful they are. And they really didn't want to watch people talking about how terrible things are, because they already knew everything was terrible. So it's like,
I mean,
what?
if you want to watch the news, then feel free to do so. But
You watch the news, but you have to pick, like, okay, I'm going to watch 45 minutes a day, and then we're going to stop, because
and then
um,
because I want to, I want to watch something like Prairie, or like something that is really fun and just,
something not only just uplifting and escapism, but also something that is giving people actually
hope.
like emotional tools to deal with it.
Yeah,
Like, well,
to
how
cope
did
with
they?
all of
Oh,
this. Yeah.
okay. So Laura went to her parents and they talked about it, and that was what got, and it helped people. I hope people don't. And like my reading the books, which I need to go in a minute, because I got to get ready to read a book again. For
Oh
it's
yeah,
that
I
time
got
of day,
5 minutes
right?
anyway.
So they liked watching mine, because they said, okay, yeah, but we would talk. They felt like I was in the room with them and talking to them, and it was comfort, because it's like, I can't get out, I'm not seeing my friends. Allison's kind of in my living room in her body, and I'm reading these books that they remember from their childhood, and they're going, this is fascinating. And we talk about things in the 1800s. Like, oh, I'd be reading and say, now you see here, she mentions this. Well, in the 1800s, and we get very historical and educational, and like the one I'm doing now is fascinating, because it's all these articles Laura wrote for the newspaper, like, it's all 1919 and women are getting the right to vote. And guess what just happened? It's the Spanish flu pandemic. Some of
Yeah,
these articles
I
from
was just
1917.
about to mention that.
She's
Yep.
just gone through World War
100
One
years ago.
and the Spanish flu. They have just had what she's
Yeah.
talking about, people being devastated by World War One, people coming back from the
Then World
war,
War II.
financial
I
devastation,
mean,
and
yeah,
yeah,
World
World
War
War
II.
One and the Spanish flu pandemic, and talking about the pandemic. So she's just gone through this, and it's in the middle. And some of the chapters are in like 1918. And they're in the middle of the pandemic, in the middle of World War One. And in the middle of political turmoil, women are getting the vote, and what are we going to do? And she talks about all of this, but it's 100 years ago, talking about everything we're talking about
So
now.
history is
And it's
repeating itself, I guess.
fabulous. So I'm reading that every day. And people are like, this is, they're sitting there at the popcorn going, this is great. Yeah. It's like, they feel better. And it's, so it's relaxing, but it's also giving people something to think about, going, well, now here's another perspective on a similar terrible situation. Maybe this can help me in this terrible situation.
Yeah. So for confessions, so where did that idea come to be? Like, and did you expect it to like really blow up the way it did? Like with the culture and whatnot, like out in the general
So
public?
what happened was I had been doing like regular stand-up, and then I got booked into New York, and they said, now look, you're coming into this club in New York. Joan Rivers is performing there like the night before and everything. And so they said, you need to, I mean, I think my act was not G-rated, but so they said you probably should like be maybe swear more or like dirty. What? They said, well, Joan Rivers, she curses the air blue. I'm really okay. And they said, but you also need to do an hour and a half. So I said, hour and a half. Los Angeles comics famously, like if you had 20 minutes, this was like a long time. So it's like, no, like an hour and a half. Like, really? So I want to do Q&A. And I said, I'm going to tell all real stories. I'm not going to do my own. I'm going to write a new thing. I'm going to tell true stories, all true stories of things that happened to me, that are stories I normally tell. Like, as a friend of mine said, your act's okay, but the stories you tell afterwards in the bar are much funnier. What if I told those stories? So it put together all true stories and a Q&A and all this sort of audience participation. And I did it at Club Fez in New York in 2002. And it was a smash. It was such a smash. They went crazy. I had to come up and do an encore. It was ridiculous. I was on stage for 2 hours. So it was such a hit. I said, I'm doing this. And then I met Sue Hamilton, who's at the Renberg Theater in LA. And she said, can we do a thing with video? And I went, yeah. So next thing I know, she workshops the show. We add all this stuff and there's video. And then that became a hit. Then I met the guy in France who said, can we do this in French? I'm like, sure, why not? And so now it's this like epic thing, Confessions of a Prairie Bitch, the stage show. And then I met the literary agent. He went, is there a book to go with the show? And I went, there could be. And then I write the book. So it all came out of, what if I told people the truth? What if I told people real stories from my life? And it just blew up from there.
Because it blew up in New York, Florida, and now it's all over. It's pretty much
Yeah.
all across the nation now. So yeah, since we are out of time, would you like to what exciting stuff have you got coming up? What can we expect to see Alison? I mean, I know you've got a lot coming up.
I'm running out to the Cherry Blossom Festival in Marshfield, Missouri, and it's near Mansfield, which is where Laura lived when she wrote the book. So we'll probably be visiting Mansfield, Missouri, where Laura and Almanza lived, and they're buried there and everything. Very historic. And the Cherry Blossom Festival is great. We've got a bunch of people from Little House. We have the woman who played Baby Grace. We have Charlotte, who played Miss Beadle. Wendy Lee played Baby Grace. We have Pat Laberta, who played Andy Garvey. So we have a bunch of people from the Prairie coming. There are people from all kinds of shows and movies coming to this thing, and they have panels about all sorts of historic events, and then all the celebrities. And we have those radio show people I was talking about coming. And we're probably going to be doing an episode of Ethel and Albert, and I think I'm playing the cab driver. It's just like I said, we're doing radio shows, everything. It's a whole like week-long extravaganza. So I'm doing that. And then I'm going to New York, and I will be at the Laurie Beachman Theater on May 8th, Mother's Day, doing Confessions, my Mother's Day special show. We always do it's very funny. We get the wildest crowds. We actually had a fight breakout once. I said, who has a fight breakout at the Mother's Day brunch? I asked. Kind of people
Like
who
really, you don't hear that every
they had
day.
a
You don't get
brawl in
that
the
often.
aisles at
Yeah.
the Mother's Day brunch. So I'm doing that. And then I come home, and then I have the fabulous AIDS fundraiser where I get the award. Then I'm doing, there's a thing called the Fanboy Expo I'm doing in August. Then, July 4th weekend, finally, people have been begging for this. The Hollywood show, big autograph show in LA. We're having a Little House reunion, a whole bunch of us from Little House in the Prairie. A bunch of us are
Nice.
all going to be at the Hollywood show. And that's going to be really exciting because there's never been, we rarely get that many of us together. And so that'll be cool.
Cool. And do you have any last piece of advice to anybody out there who wants to give this crazy, wacky, wild career a shot? I guess. What's your last piece of advice that you
Yeah,
have for people?
usually it's like stay out of show business, but if you must, start where you are. A lot of people want to jump on the plane and go to Hollywood or New York, and those are the big cities, and it's hard. And there's a million people coming to Hollywood, New York to be famous, and it's very difficult. So wherever you are, surely has schools, colleges, community theaters, has theater you can do. Nowadays, for God's sakes, you can have your own YouTube channel and make your own series. There's web series now. Shows that are on the web that used to be, isn't that nice? You have web series, are nominated for Emmys now. People are winning Emmys for stuff they did on the internet. So it's like, please, you could have your own web series. You can create your own stuff. We are now in a world where everyone is creating their own stuff. I had to by, in this case, but all of my friends are doing it. They're creating stuff out of their living rooms. Don't be afraid to try to create your own stuff. Write your own book, write your own show, write your own thing. Come up with something crazy. This reading thing, I think I'll read the books. Oh, maybe I should read them on Facebook. Okay. It just, talk about organically. It seemed like a good idea and it turned into a real hit. Do something that's really you. Like I said, the stuff in my stand-up act, it kind of writes itself. It's all true. If you write a book or you write a show, make it real. Tell a story that's true, that is about you, that actually happened. You don't have to make anything up. Probably your real life is enough. And as an actor, you tell the truth. It's you. So it is possible. So don't be afraid to create your own stuff. Don't be afraid to experiment with all the things that are out there with theater and the internet and all the things that can be done right where you are without rushing off to Hollywood and let them come discover you and fly out. You never know where it's going to be. If you told me 20 years ago that I would be doing a show in French and have a whole second career in France. If you told me 20 years ago I would have all these things that I'm doing on the internet, I would not have had the slightest idea what you were even talking about. So realize you may not know what's going to be the hit, what's going to be the thing that resonates with people, and what it is you're going to be doing later. You can't predict it. So don't be afraid to create your own stuff and be prepared to adapt to any new situation.
Cool. Yeah, that's really solid advice. Well, Allison, if you'd like to promote your socials and just any last
I'm
words
on
that you
every
have
day.
on, yeah.
Yeah, I'm Alison Arngrim on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm at Arngrim. I'm everywhere. UBN Go, the Alison Arngrim Show, which is also Facebook Alison Arngrim Show. You can find it there. You can see it on Facebook or UBN Go. It's every Tuesday at 5. And then it like lives on all the things, Stitcher and iTunes or the podcast. YouTube channel, Who's Going to Do the Cooking? The book is still out there available. Confessions of a Prairie Bitch. Stageit.com. Probably have another one in June. Go to my website, bonnetheads. .com. I have a store as well on Square. I can sell you a bonnet. Spin Cycle New York City and Spin Cycle NYC books my shows like in New York and East Coast. So yeah, you can sign up for the Nelly newsletter if you email loose gravel prod at AOL, LOOSEGRAVELPROD at AOL.com, loose gravel prod, and say, I want the Nelly newsletter. And then we will send you a newsletter once a month, which will tell you everything I'm doing.
Nice. I would ask, like, what's something about yourself that we don't really know about you, but I think you pretty much shared a lot of neat
Think I
information
covered.
already. So you covered it already. So yeah,
Yeah.
let's see. So where do you see everything moving forward into the future? Just in
I
general.
don't know. Like I said, if you told me oh gosh, in 2019, hey, you'll be locked in your house for months and doing your show from your living room to so
Hmm.
yeah, you don't, who the heck knew this is all going to go down? You don't know what's going to happen next. You really don't know. Things could go
Yeah.
really weird. Like I said, you could just wake up one morning and turn on the news and they're saying, hey, everybody stay in your house. What the hell's going to happen next? Kind of got to be prepared for anything. Where do I see this going? Well, as I said, I am working on the cookbook. I really like the cooking thing. I would really enjoy having a cooking show and a cookbook. That's a thing. I would love that. It's me. I like that. I would love to have that. Things are as things are opening up and trying to open up, picking up, my agent is talking to people. I'm seeing that I may wind up doing more TV and film, which I'd love to do. Um, but I also really like the live stuff. I really enjoy theater. And I'm hoping that that really comes back with a vengeance and I'm able to do more plays and things. So yeah, more live stuff. But if they announce that, we've all got Ebola and I have to tape the windows shut and broadcast everything from the living room, I'm totally prepared to do that.
What's your best dishes, like favorite foods that you like to cook? I'm sorry, I gotta know this. I'm a
Yeah,
food,
I
bit
mean,
of a
I
food
mean,
junkie.
simple things. Like I said, the first thing I taught people to make was scrambled eggs. Because, like, who can't make scrambled eggs? My father taught me to make scrambled eggs when I was like 5. I love Thanksgiving dinner. I'm not bragging, I make the best turkey in town. Everyone who's been to my house for Thanksgiving and had a roast turkey will tell you I make the most moist, perfect turkey ever made. And I also make fabulous I learned to make a turkey for my dad. My husband Bob makes a stuffing. He has a Sicilian stuffing recipe. It's like amazing that he does. And I learned to make gravy for my Auntie Marion. So turkey and gravy is really I love that. I do interesting things with Cornish game hens. I love a lot of chicken. I don't eat red meat. I have recipes that you could use red meat because I use the ground turkey a lot. But I do love those dishes. Um, I like Italian food. I make a killer meatball. I make a fabulous spaghetti sauce. So those would probably be my top favorites.
Neat. We could talk about food all day, but we have
My
approached the.
God,
I know we really
who's
could,
going
but
to do the cooking? Go to who's going to do Alison or who's going to do the cooking on YouTube. You will crack up. It's just me in a t-shirt and jeans in the kitchen going, wait, here's how we do this. Look, see, I stir that. It's just like silliness, but then I'm also making like really good food.
yeah. So there you go. Watch her cooking channel, YouTube. Yeah. So yeah, we've approached the end of this. Do you have like any last words, any final goodbyes,
That's plenty.
farewells?
That's plenty. Yeah, tune in for myself and just there. Try, like I said, it sounds crazy. To say, try and stay
Sounds
positive. It's
great.
very hard to do that, but try and stay positive. You don't know what's going to happen next. My father used to say you could be hit by a bus tomorrow. Boy, you wasn't kidding. It is hard. Don't try to stay positive by saying, oh, everything's fine. No, yeah, everything's not fine. They got a pandemic. It's killed millions of people. It's terrible. There's a terrible disease and it's awful, and people are getting sick and getting long COVID. There's a war. There's a huge war, and people are getting killed. And it's really, and we don't know where that's going. That could get much worse. There's lots of horrible. These people still have AIDS. It's countries where people are still dying of AIDS. Here in America, oh, we have these great drugs. Not if you're in South Africa. Things are terrible. There's terrible things going on. There are huge numbers of people right now being shoved into homelessness and poverty, driven into poverty. Things are very, very difficult for people. People are sick. People are getting killed in war. People, you name it. So trying to say, everything's great. Times are really hard. But this has happened before. It's all happened before and will happen again. Times have been hard and people get through it. People survive. Some people just survive. And you're going to try to have to survive however you know how. And staying positive doesn't mean ignoring that terrible things are happening. It's saying, well, what can I do? What can I do? I can't make it all stop. I can't wave a wand, but what can I do? Because absolutely there are organizations that are helping people with COVID. There are organizations that are helping the people in Ukraine. There are organizations that are helping people, and you can go call them up and ask how you can help. And you can participate and do something about all the terrible things. So try to stay positive. Yes, know that it's not your imagination. Things really are kind of terrible right now. But I always like to say, well, it might be okay later. It's been known to get okay again. It's been worse than this before, and then it got better. Perhaps this will get better too. But absolutely do what you can. Do what you can to help. Do what you can and start locally. Pick up the phone and call your friends. Are they okay? How are they doing? How did they get impacted by the pandemic? See if they're all right and do they need anything? That's what you can do.
Yep. And on that note, I guess this is the best way to possibly end off this episode to close out today's little recording. So thank you, Alison, for stopping by today. This has been a very fun chat with you today. I really love doing this. So
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Yeah. And with that said, if you guys want to check out more of the podcast, be sure to head over to my SoundCloud, Anchor, and this is going to be up on my YouTube channel sometime over the weekend. It might even
Cool.
be up later today. So yeah, um, depending on how things go. But with that, thank you very much for watching. This has been the Station Square podcast, and I am Robert Jackson, and I'm officially signing out for I mean, I do have another interview immediately right after this. But so yeah,
You're
this has
going
been
to
the
be
first
going all
interview.
day here. Yeah.
Yep, going all day, all day, all day. It's about the hustle, sweetheart. It's about the hustle. So with that, thank you so much
Thank you.
for staying around to the very end of this. Thank you. And with that, I'm officially out of here. And with that, good day, folks. Bye. Out. Peace.